Welcome, everyone, to our very first seminar for TransplantLyfe University. My name is Karin Hehenberger. I am the president of Lyfebulb and the founder of TransplantLyfe, and I'm super excited to be here today. And I'm going to be introducing a really well-respected and renowned speaker who's part of our team, our Director of Research and Education, Maiya Hogan, who's also a registered dietitian and very familiar with this subject. So today we're going to start our seminar series with a focus on lifestyle. And today's focus is on how to set and achieve healthcare goals, which is very appropriate for January. We will be continuing these seminars on a monthly basis, and there will be 4 themes: lifestyle, medication, and different parts of the transplant journey when it comes to drugs and devices and so on, as well as innovation, and finally, navigating healthcare. So today we are starting with lifestyle, and I am really excited again to give the floor to Maiya Hogan. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Karin, for that introduction. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I have some slides that I'm going to go through today with you. More is just to help us out and aid the conversation. We're talking about health goals. Before I go too far, I do want to give just a quick disclaimer to remind everybody attending this information is for education only. It is in no way intended to replace any advice from your transplant team or your healthcare providers. So any changes you feel motivated to make today, make sure it's all good with your healthcare providers before proceeding full speed ahead. Additionally, we're going to take questions for the second half of the presentation. I just want to make sure everyone uses the privacy policy, so don't share full names or any identifying details, and that includes for yourself as well as providers or anyone else you might bring into the Q&A in your example. And again, this is patient-centered. We're here to be supportive, so no harassment, medical misinformation, etc. And now we get into the fun stuff. So as Karin mentioned, I'm a dietitian. I have spent years counseling patients and clients on changing behaviors and achieving new health goals. And so today, what I hope you walk away with is the ability to understand what makes a goal achievable, learn how to set realistic goals for any aspect of your life. So this is sort of universally applicable, although we're going to focus it in on health and diet related goals today. And then you're going to be prepared to adjust and level up your goals because you're going to start making progress if you're applying these foundational guides. So why are we talking about goals at all? Well, we know that at the root of everything we try to do is usually a goal. And in January, I'm thinking a lot about New Year's resolutions. And it may not surprise you to know that lots of people set New Year's resolutions, but only 9% of Americans achieve those goals that they set for themselves. So think about your own goals, and maybe one of these scenarios sounds familiar to you. And these are just kind of some examples to get your creativity flowing, because in a minute, I'm going to ask you to think about setting your own goal. So getting fit. And again, this comes from examples I've seen in the real world, examples I've heard in discussions with patients and clients. Getting fit is a big one, and I've heard it countless times. I'm going to get fit so I can lose weight, feel ready for the summer maybe. So I'm going to hit the gym every day until I've lost X amount of weight or gained X amount of muscle or whatever their goal is. And they hit the gym on day one, they work out way too hard, and they're extremely sore for days after, and they never go back to the gym but continue to pay full price for that gym membership. Or maybe more specific to transplant, you are post-kidney transplant and your fluid requirements change. All of a sudden, you need 3 times more fluid than you were taking in before. That can be really challenging and quite a mental shift for you. So you get overwhelmed trying to take on this new added fluid, and you just don't know where to start. And the problem with that is it's so important. You know it's so important, and you're not achieving it. And then you're also beating yourself up mentally. You're saying, "Oh, you're failing at this. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're letting yourself down. You're letting everybody down, right?" And we start to get this like mental invasion of how bad we're doing because we're not hitting a goal. Or maybe because of your transplant medications, you're experiencing GI issues, which is pretty common. And so you're looking for anything to stop it, and you find this supplement on social media, maybe you're on TikTok or Instagram, and they're like, hey, do you have X, Y, and Z problems with, your bowel movements, your stomach, or whatever? Well, this supplement's going to fix it for you. So you buy into it, you get that supplement, you take it for maybe 3 days, you forget about it, you decide it doesn't work, and you're out some money and your GI symptoms don't improve. That's normal. So when we think about goals, we know, and this is not just me saying so, this is based in science. We find that it's really difficult to follow through on a plan if it doesn't match your current ability, if it's not well defined, if it's too simple, like you're looking for a magic bullet that's just going to change your entire experience of the world, or it's too complex. You created too many steps that are really hard to achieve, or you're biting off more than you can chew, or it contradicts your current knowledge, beliefs, or experience. So you need to do some steps before the next step, maybe an adjustment or gaining some information that you don't have to put the pieces together. And that's hard. So we know that we have behaviors that are well established. I think most of you joining today are adults, right? So for years and years and years, maybe decades, you have been doing certain behaviors around diet and lifestyle that maybe you did because of a chronic disease that you had prior to receiving your transplant, or a chronic disease you're still dealing with, or maybe it's behaviors that you learned from your parents, whatever it is. You need to know that these pathways, these behaviors are well established in your brain. You could close your eyes on this road and just drive straight and never run into anything and stay on track. New behaviors are not a clear, straightforward path. They are the wilderness. They are not even a footpath in our brains. And so when we take on a new behavior, we have to build that new pathway. And we are not going to lay that road overnight or in one day. We are going to get lost very easily in this wilderness until we start doing this every single day. So there's one myth I'm going to dispel real quick, which is that if you do something for 30 days, it's a habit. I can attest from my own personal experience, as well as working with clients and patients, you can do something for 30 days every day, and then on day 31, never think about it again. And it's not a habit. You have to do something probably thousands of times, especially if it's replacing one of these well-established pathways or one of these well-established behaviors, before you're really ready to do it all the time. So how do we rewire our brains? One, I'm going to ask you to let go of the all or nothing mindset. It's not going to serve you. Be prepared to scale back. Remember, we're not laying that road all in one day. We're going to take it one step at a time, which means we're going to need to break down our goals into those steps. So here, I'm going to ask you to do a little work. I want you, if you've got a pen and paper, your phone handy, write down a goal. I want you to think about it, and we're going to come back to it as we go. So take a few seconds. Maybe you came with a goal in mind. Go ahead and just jot it down. And it can be really simple, really simple. So for example, I'm going to give you my goal, not to get too personal, but I promised my friends that on March 1st, I was going to run a 5K with them. And we can talk about why that was a good or bad choice at another event, but that's what I'm going to use sort of as an example for this. So what we're going to do, we have this big goal at the end, right? To get there, we're going to set up a lot of steps, and we're going to break those steps down into even smaller steps, right? That's because we can't just jump to the end. We have to do the work to get there. And that can seem very daunting if you're not prepared to sort of break it out into these smaller steps that you need. So that goal that you just wrote down, start thinking about, how can I break this into smaller steps, right? How can I be more consistent with my medications? How can I make sure I'm drinking water appropriately? How can I have less screen time? That kind of thing. We're going to start rewiring our brains by applying these 3 concepts. The first is setting up steps that are smart. And again, we're going to talk about each one of these individually in just a moment. So setting up smart steps. Then you also want to introduce accountability. And then you want to make sure you're evaluating your progress and adjusting on a regular basis. If you remember that wilderness, that mountain picture I showed you, it's really easy especially if you don't have a well-established pathway, to wander off track. And all of a sudden, you're putting a lot of time and attention into something that's actually not taking you in the direction of your health goal. So you have to regularly evaluate, is this helping me get to where I want to be? And if not, okay, we need to course correct. And that only comes through self-evaluation or talking it through with somebody. So SMART goals, this is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Any goal that you have and any step for those goals needs to be SMART. Again, this is all backed by science. I didn't want to cite a lot of research for you today, but this is shown to make things more accessible and achievable for us. So specific, you need to lay out what it is you're actually doing. What is the action you're going to take? It needs to be measurable. So oftentimes it's a checkbox. Did you do it or did you not do it? Yes or no? Is it achievable? So I'm going to come back to my 5K example. Am I able to achieve running a 5K today, this day in January? Absolutely not. I know for a fact. But the goals, the steps I'm setting up will make it achievable for me to run that 5K on March 1st. So I'm breaking down these steps and focusing on what is achievable for me right now, not what is achievable in 2 months, not as what is achievable even next week, but in this moment, what is achievable for me to accomplish? It needs to be relevant. And I want to talk about this also in terms of, in healthcare. Sometimes your doctor comes to you and says, you need to do this, okay? And that sounds important, but that's not necessarily relevant. So for example, I've had lots of patients come to me and say, I need to follow a heart healthy diet. That might be something you've been recommended, right? We know long-term, there's a lot of metabolic concerns post-transplant, and we want to prevent things like heart disease. So maybe you're trying to follow a diet to maintain a healthy weight or avoid heart disease or avoid diabetes, right? And that doesn't necessarily feel relevant when it's just prescribed to you. So you have to find a way that makes it feel relevant. Why is this your goal, right? We know it's your doctor's goal for you to eat healthier, but why is it your goal to eat healthier? That's important. How does it fit into the big picture of your life, what you're trying to achieve? And it needs to be time bound. You need a time frame for completing this goal. So for me personally, I set goals week to week. So when I'm working on achieving that 5K, I have that long-term goal, but each week I have a step or a goal that I'm trying to achieve, and that will add up. The time will pass, and then I'll get to March 1st when the big major goal hits. And then you need to be ready to advance that. So here we've broken it down, like the end goal, the big milestone is to get fit, but our first milestone is to build stamina. And I've set up a SMART step that will get me to building stamina that will take 3 months. This is not my 5K plan, in case you're wondering. But say you're working to build stamina, maybe you're starting from nowhere. You've been recently hospitalized, maybe you're recently post-transplant, or maybe you just haven't spent time being physically active for a long time. So you need to build up stamina before you can even start doing what some people would refer to as exercise. So you start with a 15-minute walk 3 times per week during the month of January. So every week during the month of January, you're going to walk 3 times a week for 15 minutes. Then in February, you're going to advance that to 5 times a week. And then in March, you're going to walk 30 minutes 5 times a week. One thing you might notice is that I'm advancing in this term for fitness, either the duration or the frequency of the exercise. And it's really important you do one or the other. If your goal is around exercise or fitness, never increase both at the same time. One or the other, this is going to make it more achievable for you and avoid burnout. Now, another thing I want to address is measuring your goals and your success. So building stamina, that's kind of vague. It's subjective, right? What does building stamina really look like? Well, you can bring objective measurement into it, right? This is something that's outside of you, right? That can tell us like data or numbers that can tell us whether there's measurable progress. So formally, you can measure stamina by having a healthcare provider administer a sit-to-stand test or a 6-minute walking test. Maybe you have a wearable device that tracks your heart rate while you're walking. That can be objective measurement. You could also scale and write down and track on a scale. On a scale of 1 to 10, how difficult is it for you to walk for 15 minutes? 1 being not difficult at all and 10 being next to impossible, right? Like I couldn't actually finish 15 minutes. I had to cut it out early because I just could not do it, right? You can do scales like that for anything, energy, sleep, all sorts of stuff that you can just put on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 and track those changes over time. So think about the steps that you wrote down to achieve your goal. And think about, is there any way that you can make your goal smarter, make it more specific or actionable, measurable, relevant, or time-bound? Or is it missing one of those key components? Again, these key components, the specificity, and making sure it's relevant, making sure you can measure it. This is how you're going to know if you're actually making progress, and knowing about whether or not you're actually making progress is going to make you feel pretty good once you start to see movement happening there. You also want to make sure you're setting up accountability. So I like to use the dentist as the example. Most people, or many people, know they're supposed to probably floss every single day, but they don't until about a week before their dentist appointment, and then they start flossing every day for a week, and then they go to the dentist so they can tell the dentist, yes, I was flossing, right? That accountability, knowing the dentist is going to be checking up on whether or not you flossed, is what motivates people to do it. But it's not happening often enough for them to establish that behavior all of the time, right? If you saw the dentist every week, you might floss every day in between those appointments. So accountability, the expectation of follow-up, is what helps us follow through. If you're looking for someone to help hold you accountable, like an accountability buddy, this is a friend. So for me, my example, I'm running this 5K with 3 of my friends. We're holding each other accountable to training and preparing for this run. Or you can use a healthcare provider. So as a dietitian working with clients, I provided that service to many people, right? I'm going to follow up with you next week to see how you're doing on this goal you set. It's really important, and again, this comes from the research, to pick someone that you like, respect, and know will be reliable, right? We just do better hearing like someone holding us accountable when we like them versus someone you don't like being like, oh, you didn't eat that broccoli like you said you would at lunch. Like, you don't want to hear that from someone you don't like. It's just, you don't need science to know that, but they've studied that. The next thing we're going to do is evaluate progress and adjust as needed. So say, coming back to our walking example, you've accomplished in January your 15-minute walks 3 times per week. Great. You get to February and all of a sudden you've got a scheduling conflict. There's no way you can find 15 minutes 5 days a week to do this walk. Maybe it's inclement weather, right? You only have certain amount of hours in daylight to walk. I say this coming from Seattle where it gets dark at like 4 p.m. Or whatever it is. You just can't fit it in. Does that mean you give up? Honestly, a lot of people would stop. They'd hit this roadblock and say, I can't do anything else. And they might not just not advance, they might give up altogether, right? This is not uncommon. But I invite you to think, how could I adjust my plan? Well, you still got 3 days per week. You still want to advance and increase your stamina. So bump it up to 20 minutes 3 times a week, right? Easy adjustment. You're just adding 5 more minutes on to something that you've already started doing. Or maybe you get an injury. You like rolled your ankle walking and it's swollen up and you can't walk for a month. Well, that's a problem if our building our stamina is reliant on walking. But again, we can adjust. Chair exercises for 15 minutes a week for 15 minutes 4 times per week during the month of February, right? This is something that we can add in. Or you tried walking for the month of January and you decide, I actually really hate walking. Like, it's not fun, it's not stimulating, it's boring, whatever it is, I don't like it. Maybe it's too cold outside. Okay, let's swap, let's adjust, let's rework the system. Let's instead find something that you do enjoy doing. And from there, we recreate our plan. So make a list of 3 different exercises to try by the end of the week. So by the end of the week, you're going to have a list of different exercises you can try, and they meet certain criteria. They have to be inexpensive, accessible, and you suspect they would be fun for you or entertaining, or get whatever, scratch whatever itch you're looking for your building your stamina, right? Then we haven't even started exercising it. Then you're going to find and make a list of free online videos or guides for each of the following. So I just picked these at random: dance, aerobics, yoga, weightlifting. You're going to find a video, you're going to do them. And then for 3 weeks, you're going to exercise 2 times a week using one of your new resources. And that way you get to experiment and try out, see what you like, what you don't like. Maybe you hate them all and you start over again. But at least you have now a pattern or an idea of how to do this. So, thinking about the steps you wrote down for your big goal, what backup plans could you have in place so you can change as needed and still make progress towards your goal? That's the next thing I want you to think about. I won't want to spend too much time because I want to make sure we get into the questions because that's the more important part. But before I open it up to questions, I do just want to remind everybody, when you are trying a new behavior, it is about practice, not perfection. Practice means to perform or exercise repeatedly or regularly in order to improve. So the goal here is to improve upon what you're already doing. The goal is not to be perfect. If your goal is perfection, you are always going to fall short. But if your goal is to improve, you're going to start to see success pretty quickly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions.
First, Maiya, I really want to thank you for this very clear presentation. I learned a lot personally, and I'm really excited to get some of the questions to you. And we have comments and questions already from the chat. Just wanted to open it up with a question on one of your points, which is the stepwise approach to achieving a goal. Do you ever introduce little rewards along the path so that, yeah.
Absolutely. People do respond to that, and oftentimes it helps if it's a reward that kind of matches what your goal is. So, for example, if your goal is around eating healthier, getting yourself a new kitchen tool when you've stuck with your meal prep for a week or something. That way, it aids the experience. Or for example, the running, right? I'm going to get myself a new pair of workout pants or whatever because I did this. Or maybe it's not an object that you buy, but something you get to do. Like, I'm going to sit down and watch my favorite TV show once I've finished loading the dishes today, or once I've made sure I've taken all my medications for the day, or whatever it is, and tie in rewards wherever it feels relevant. Absolutely.
I think it is important, and we get comments here from the chat about baby steps, and also a comment appreciating your advice on being able to redirect. Because as you go through these mini steps and toward your ultimate goal, if you don't achieve it, then many people feel disappointed. But being able to redirect is really crucial. Another comment, and perhaps if you could guide us, you talked about you having 3 friends with you on this journey. That's having them as supporting you, but sometimes maybe your goal can only be achieved if you depend on someone. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so it's hard when you need someone to help you. Like there's a gatekeeper that you need them to do something before you can proceed ahead with the next steps, right? And this can happen, maybe it's a conversation you need to have with your doctor. I find that it's helpful to sort of become their accountability person. So, clear communication. Anytime you need something from someone, maybe it's I need medical clearance from my doctor before this personal trainer will work with me, or something along those lines. You need to communicate that to your physician, and it needs to be clear communication. So, writing out a list of what you need from them, and whoever you're asking, writing out the list of steps you need. This could also be, say you have a partner or a spouse and children. This comes up, and again, I'm not trying to make it personal, but like balancing kids, childcare while you're trying to accomplish a goal that you can't really do with kids around, right? That's communicating. I need this from you as a co-parent to take the kids during this time on this day, this week. so that I can accomplish this. And just like putting it out there very clearly what you're asking for, but also making it clear to them why you're trying to accomplish this. Because oftentimes it just helps to know the why of the ask, and then people will often follow through. The other thing you can do is say, again, coming back to the physician, say, hey, I'm going to follow up with you next week to see if you've been able to complete this, and give them that information. Like, I'm going to keep bothering you about this until you give me what I need, because my goal is contingent on this thing happening, right? So
Yeah.
it's just about communication.
We got a question from the audience about the time it takes to rewire. I believe you did address that, but maybe you can reiterate how long it takes to rewire the brain
That's a
to
really
induce a habit.
it's really complicated. I'm not sure the research is clear on that. What I do know is, again, it's just about being consistent. And this comes back to one of my big pet peeves, is that sometimes people take on big life changes for without the intention of sticking with it for life, right? So
Mhm.
adopting a new diet, a new healthy way of eating, or adopting being more physically active just in general. People look at it as this, like, I'm going to do this until the wedding, or I'm going to do this until my next doctor's appointment, and then I'm going to stop. If you have that mindset going in that it's sort of this temporary change you're going to make, it's never going to become a habit. You're not going to trick yourself into being a habit, because at the back of your mind, you know, it's really temporary. I'm not really motivated to keep it going. If you know you're trying to establish something for long-term benefits, it makes it easier to then continue to rework it. So I'm going to go back to my 5K example, right? I have this 5K on March 1st. My goal, ultimate goal, is not run that 5K. My ultimate goal is to have consistent physical activity in my life, right? So this is just one entry point to that. So sometimes too, it helps to think, what is your long-term aspirational goal for this? Because the science won't tell you. It's not gonna click one day, like all of a sudden, oh, you can't live without running, or oh, you're gonna take your medication every day because you've done it for whatever. I can tell you, again, personal experience, I've been taking supplements for a decade. I still miss days. There's still days where I forget to take them, even though I've done it for years, right?
Yeah.
It's just hard to fight existing habits when, I mean, that precedes 30 years of behavior or whatever. So I'm
But
trying.
it's interesting. I think going back to your example, and we're having lots of comments here that are really, very much talking about what we're talking about. I'm going to bring up if there's an additional question. But I think your 5K is interesting because the 5K in itself could almost be seen as a reward. You're
Mhm.
able to do it while your goal is to be more physically active, right?
Yeah.
So, if you think about a diet goal, you're saying I'm going to stop eating chocolate. I think or sugar. We take sugar, refined sugar. I'm going to stop eating sugar. Obviously there's sugar in everything, in a lot of things, so you can't just remove it. But they normally say that when you remove a sugar from your diet, it could take about a month, right, until your flora, right, your gastrointestinal tract is kind of rehabitated with different bacteria, and now those bacteria they're not craving the sugar as much anymore, right? So you could see it from a scientific principle when it comes to diet, perhaps more than a habit, because that has to do with your brain. So
Mhm.
the research here is truly truly fascinating. But
Yeah.
going back to the practical example with the 5K, it could be a reward that you're now accomplishing that, right?
Absolutely. Well, and that's kind of one of the cool things about when you start to see progress with your health goals. That progress, that sense of achievement, is a reward in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yes, being physically active is important for health metrics, but we also know, for example, like my job, I have to read a lot of research. I need my brain to be able to take that on. You build more brain pathways when you're exercising routinely, and it's dose dependent. Not to get too nerdy, right? So if you're doing more physical activity, your brain is more primed to take in information and use it right. So that's exciting because I get more brain function. I get more energy in my day. My mood enhances, right? And these things can change with all sorts of lifestyle behaviors that we take on. our bodies aren't in silos, they're systems. So when you start to improve one area, maybe your goal is to sleep better, right?
Mhm.
Sleeping better can change your interactions with people in your life day to day. It can change your perspective on things. It can help your mood. It can help your appetite. Like, it's so cool when you start to see the impact. And yes, that like achievement is very rewarding in and of
Very
itself.
rewarding. We had a comment here, which I think is important, and it goes back to, again, your presentation, that even getting a little bit further on, even accomplishing something smaller is a big deal, right? So don't set the goal too high and don't feel that you have to become perfect. No one is perfect.
Right.
And we all have flaws or deficiencies, whatever that is. That's just part of being human. But getting a little bit closer to something that you've set yourself up to do is quite rewarding.
I agree. And I've broken things down into even smaller steps. Like if your goal is to drink more water, simply saying I'm going to drink 3 cups of water today and 4 cups of water next week or whatever, maybe it's find a water bottle or a cup that you like drinking out of, right?
Mm,
It can be
yep,
so simple, and that little like accessible point could be the change maker for you. So don't be afraid to re-examine and say, oh, I just need another step before I go to the next one.
yep. That's well said. I think that is a beautiful kind of finish to this, and I see a lot of really positive comments again in the chat. And one person said, and this is worth mentioning. Sometimes an electronic device that you have that kind of is measuring your progress might say, for example, with a step count, it might say today, oh, you didn't achieve your 10,000 steps or 5,000 or 2,000, whatever is your step count. And it might make you feel that disappointed and might make you feel like a failure. So it can be positive and negative to have that daily enforcement. But I think it's what you were saying up front was that you should be setting your goals so that you can achieve and then increasing as you go.
Absolutely. And those activity trackers can be reset to give you a goal that's more achievable for where you're at right now. And you can change that too. And I agree, there's just sometimes there's reinforcement that's negative that makes us feel like we're unaccomplished, that we're not doing what we set out to do, and how could we, and why are we failing, and why can everybody accomplish their goals and I can't.
Yeah.
Um, it's not just you. And to me, that's just an invitation to get curious about what's working versus not working for you and how to adapt to make it feel achievable. Because a goal, you've got to make it feel achievable, or else you're just never going to want to do it. And
Okay.
focusing on this step now, not 10 steps ahead, is really important.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maiya, and thank you so much to the audience. And I just want to remind everyone that we are having these seminars now going forward every month. And following this particular lifestyle topic, we're going to have a support group next week to continue the discussion. And Maiya, you will be there, I assume, to
I will
answer
be
any more
there.
questions. And
Absolutely.
and of course, for everyone who can't join the support group, we will continue the conversation on transplantlyfe.com, life with a Y. And maybe we can even talk about some of the goals that we want to achieve, and maybe we can help each other set up those kind of smaller part-time or stepwise goals so we don't all feel that it's impossible. You helped, I think, a lot of people today, and I feel really encouraged as well in my goal setting going forward.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'll be in support group next week, and I also am going to ask you guys to do me a favor and fill out the post-webinar survey. You're going to get a link via emails. This is something that will actually come at the end of every webinar. It's going to help us collect feedback and questions so we can continue to make these presentations accessible, make them interesting, and make sure they're relevant to what you want to learn about. So please take the time to fill out those surveys. That feedback is so, so helpful.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.